Marcus's hand connects with her face in the middle of the Christmas mall. The crack echoes through the food court. Shoppers freeze. Children stop mid-step. But the woman he just struck, his ex-girlfriend Diane, the one he left broke and broken 3 years ago, doesn't flinch. She simply turns her head back slowly, and the diamond on her finger catches the light. A diamond that costs more than everything Marcus has ever owned. Inside the luxury shopping bags at her feet are receipts totaling $47,000. What nobody knew was that the poor girl from the projects is now wearing a coat that costs more than Marcus's car. But that's just the beginning. The 6 men in black suits who materialize from the crowd aren't mall security. The way they move, the way their hands go to their waists. Marcus has seen that stance before, but never directed at him. Marcus Thompson thought he'd traded up when he left Diane for a woman with a degree and a downtown condo. He believed the struggling waitress he abandoned would stay exactly where he left her, desperate, alone, begging for him back. 2 weeks ago, he sent her a message on Instagram saying he missed what they had, expecting her to come running. She never even opened it, and that silence should have been his first warning. Today, he spotted her from behind in the Christmas crowd, looking too polished, too confident, too unbothered. The rage hit him before logic could. How dare she look happy without him? The slap came from that rage. What happened next would reveal a transformation so complete, so protected, so dangerous, that Marcus's moment of violence would become the worst mistake of his life. But before I show you how a single slap triggered a response that shut down an entire shopping district, you need to understand how the girl Marcus threw away like trash became untouchable. Because Diane's transformation didn't start with money or marriage. It started 18 months ago, in the hospital where she worked double shifts just to survive. When a man with a bullet wound and a Korean accent refused treatment from anyone but her. She thought she was just doing her job. She had no idea she was saving the one person in the city no one dared to cross. 3 weeks before Marcus's hand would connect with Diane's face in that Christmas mall, he was living his best life. Or so he thought. Marcus Thompson had it all figured out. New girlfriend, Shanice, had a master's degree in business administration and worked downtown for a consulting firm. Her condo had marble countertops and a doorman. She wore heels to brunch. When he posted photos of them together, his boys commented with fire emojis. This was what success looked like. This was the upgrade he deserved. What Marcus didn't know, what he wouldn't discover until 3 days after the slap, was that while he was posting those photos with fire emojis, Diane was already married. The Instagram he thought was ignoring him had been archived 8 months earlier. He was sending messages into a void. He'd scroll past Diane's profile sometimes, out of curiosity more than concern. Her page was private now, profile picture some generic sunset photo. No posts visible. No signs of life. Good, he thought. She'd probably moved back home to her mother's place, still working those hospital shifts, still stuck exactly where he left her. The thought satisfied something dark in him. He'd made the right choice leaving. A man had to have ambition, and Diane never had any. She'd been content working doubles at City General, coming home smelling like disinfectant, too tired for anything. No spark. No drive. 2 weeks before the mall, Marcus sent her a DM on Instagram. Late night. Shanice was working late again. He was bored and nostalgic. I miss what we had sometimes. Hope you're doing okay. Simple. Casual. Expected her to respond within the hour, maybe suggest coffee, maybe admit she missed him too. She never even opened it. That silence bothered him more than he wanted to admit. Read receipts turned off. No response. Who did she think she was? Now, what Marcus thought was simple ghosting, what he believed was Diane being bitter or playing hard to get, was actually something else entirely. Here's what he didn't discover until 3 days after the slap, sitting in a police station waiting room, staring at his phone with shaking hands. Diane never saw that message because her Instagram account had been archived 8 months earlier. The phone number he had for her had been disconnected for over a year. The Diane he thought was ignoring him no longer existed in any system he could access. She'd been erased from his world so completely that his message had been screaming into a void. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Back on that December afternoon, Marcus had no idea he was trying to contact a ghost. December 22nd, 2 days before Christmas Eve. The Westfield Mall was packed. Marcus wasn't usually a last-minute shopper, but Shanice had mentioned wanting something special from the Burberry store. Something that proved he was serious about their relationship. He was walking past the food court, dodging strollers and shopping bags, when he saw her. A woman in a red blazer and white pants, standing near the Christmas display with the massive poinsettias. Designer shopping bags at her feet. Hair done professionally. Not the simple ponytail Diane used to wear to save time. The way she stood, poised and unhurried, like she belonged in this space, like the world would wait for her. From behind, she looked like money. New money, the kind that made people look twice. Then she turned slightly to adjust one of her bags. The profile hit him like cold water. The slope of her nose. The curve of her jaw. Diane? His broke, tired, going nowhere Diane was standing in front of him wearing an outfit that cost more than his monthly rent. The rage came hot and instant. How dare she? He'd left her with nothing. She'd cried, begged him to reconsider, told him she needed him. And now she was here, looking like she'd never needed anyone in her life, looking better than Shanice on her best day. She was supposed to still be struggling. She was supposed to prove that leaving her was the right choice. Her success made him wrong, made him the fool. Marcus didn't think. Thinking would have stopped him. He crossed the food court in 8 strides, shoppers parting around him without registering, and his hand was already raised before logic could catch up. The crack of his palm against her face echoed off the marble floors. Diane's head snapped to the side. For 1 second, Marcus expected the reaction he'd trained into her over 2 years of dating. The tears, the confusion, the immediate apology for whatever she'd done to deserve it. Instead, she slowly turned her head back. Her cheek was red where he'd struck her, but she didn't touch it, didn't cry, didn't even blink. Her eyes met his. There was no fear there, just recognition, just pity. And then she spoke. Not in English, in Korean. Perfect, fluent Korean. The tone smooth and natural, like she'd been speaking it her whole life. Hello, darling. We have a situation. The phone had appeared in her hand without him noticing. She wasn't calling 911. The way she held it, close to her ear, intimate and calm. This was a call to someone who mattered more than police. Marcus's brain couldn't process it. Diane didn't speak Korean. Diane barely spoke up in restaurants when they got her order wrong. This woman wearing Diane's face was someone else entirely. She said one more thing into the phone, still holding his gaze. I'm at the mall. No rush. I'm fine. Then she ended the call. Around them, the food court had gone silent. Phones were up, recording. A mother pulled her child behind her. 2 teenage girls were filming, whispering urgently to each other. Marcus's hand was still raised, frozen in the air where it had been after the follow-through of his slap. And that's when he felt them before he saw them. 6 men in black suits materialized from the crowd. Not running, walking with the kind of purpose that made people scatter. Their hands moved to their waists, not drawing anything, just resting there. Promise. A warning. They formed a perimeter around Diane without a word, and suddenly Marcus wasn't standing over her anymore. He was surrounded, boxed in by men who looked at him the way you'd look at a problem that needed solving. One of them spoke into a wrist mic. 2 words in Korean. Marcus caught one. The word, wife. The diamond on Diane's finger caught the Christmas lights. 8 carats, emerald cut. Flawless. Could buy his car 3 times over. She stood slowly, smoothing her red blazer. The movement was unhurried, graceful. She collected her shopping bags, Burberry, Gucci, Cartier, $47,000 in receipts Marcus would later see on the viral video. Clear enough to zoom in and read. Marcus, she said quietly, in English now. Her voice was calm, almost kind. "You should leave." But he couldn't move. The men in suits hadn't touched him, but he couldn't move. "Who?" His voice cracked. "Who the fuck are you?" She smiled then, small and sad. "Someone you don't know anymore." One of the suited men stepped closer to Marcus. Spoke in perfect English with no accent. "Sir, you need to leave the mall now. For your own safety. For his safety. Not hers, but his." Marcus's feet finally obeyed, backing up, the crowd parting to let him through. He could hear the whispers starting, phones still recording, his face now on dozens of screens. He made it to his car before his hands started shaking. But the calm in Diane's eyes, the complete absence of fear, that didn't come from money or marriage. To understand how a woman sleeping in her car became untouchable, we need to go back to the night that changed everything. 18 months ago, the moment she saved the wrong man's life. City General Hospital, emergency room. 2:17 a.m. on a Thursday in June, 18 months before the slap. Diane was on hour 14 of a double shift. Her scrubs had a bleach stain on the left knee and a small tear near the shoulder seam she'd been meaning to fix for 3 weeks. She'd eaten half a pack of crackers from the vending machine at 11 p.m. That was dinner. Outside in her car, a 2004 Honda Civic with a broken passenger window covered in plastic, were 2 blankets and a pillow. She'd been sleeping there for 5 days since her landlord changed the locks. Eviction. She'd been short on rent for 2 months, picking up every shift she could, but it wasn't enough. It was never enough. For hours earlier, sitting in that car during her break, she'd cried until her ribs hurt. Then she'd wiped her face, gone back inside, and decided something. She would never be this vulnerable again. Whatever it took, however long it took, she would become someone who couldn't be broken. She had no idea that in 3 hours that promise would be tested. The ambulance bay doors crashed open. Not unusual, but the men who came through weren't paramedics. For Korean men in expensive suits, stained with blood. They were carrying a 5th man between them, his black coat soaked through, face pale as paper. "We need a doctor. Now." The one in front spoke English with a thick accent. His eyes were hard, scanning the room like he was calculating exits. Diane moved on instinct, pulling a gurney over. "Put him here." "What happened?" "Kitchen accident." The lie was obvious. The wound in the man's side was from a blade, possibly 2. Deep. Professional. The injured man's eyes opened. He looked at Diane, focused despite the blood loss. Said something in Korean to his men. They responded rapidly, arguing with him. "He says he wants you to treat him." The man in front translated. "Only you. I'm a nurse, not a surgeon. He says you. Only you." The man's hand moved to his waist. Not a threat exactly, but a clarification of priorities. Diane looked at the patient. He was still watching her. His eyes were dark, intelligent, calculating even through pain. He said something else in Korean. This time it was a question. "He wants to know your name." "Diane." "Diane Mitchell." He nodded once. Then, in careful English, "I trust you, Diane Mitchell." She looked at the wound. He was dying. 15, maybe 20 minutes without surgery. The men around him looked like they'd shoot their way out before they'd let her call the police, which this clearly required. She made a choice. Operating room 2. Now. And I need someone to assist. Real medical staff, not you. She pointed at the men. "You stay in the waiting area or I walk away." The leader started to object. The patient raised one hand, spoke firmly in Korean. An order. The men hesitated, then stepped back. They moved him 2 or 2. Diane called in Dr. Santos, a surgeon who'd learned to ask fewer questions during night shifts in this part of the city. Together they worked for 6 hours. 2 liters of blood. 63 stitches. Diane's hands didn't shake once. When it was done, when the patient was stable and sleeping, one of the suited men approached her in the hallway. He placed an envelope on the nurse's station. Thick, heavy. "For your discretion." Diane opened it. $50,000 in cash. I can't accept this. The man's eyebrows raised. You saved his life. I did my job. I don't take money for that. She pushed the envelope back across the counter. The man stared at her for a long moment. Then he took the envelope, bowed slightly, a gesture that seemed formal, ritualistic, and walked away. Diane filled out the intake paperwork. Kitchen accident. The story no one would believe but everyone would accept. She didn't know that the man whose life she'd just saved was Jin-Woo Park. She didn't know that his name controlled half the underground economy in the city. She didn't know that refusing his money had done something no amount of money could buy. It had earned his respect. She didn't know that from that moment on, she would never be invisible again. And when she walked out to her car at 8:47 a.m., exhausted and hungry, planning to sleep for 3 hours before her evening shift, she had no idea that Jin-Woo Park had already opened his eyes in recovery, asked who she was, and made a decision that would change both their lives forever. Marcus sat in his car in the mall parking lot, hands still shaking, watching the entrance like someone might come after him. They didn't. 20 minutes passed. 30. Nothing. He pulled out his phone. His hands were steadier now, but his mind was racing. Who was that woman? Because she wasn't Diane. Diane didn't speak Korean. Diane didn't have security. Diane definitely didn't have a ring that could pay off his car loan 5 times over. Marcus typed her name into Google. Nothing. He tried Diane Park on a hunch. Korean last names were common. Still nothing, no Facebook, no Instagram, no wedding announcements. It was like she'd been erased. Then his phone buzzed. Unknown number. Just 2 words. You fucked up. And a link. Marcus's stomach dropped before he even clicked it. The link opened to Twitter. A video. Already at 127,000 views and climbing. Posted 11 minutes ago. The video was crystal clear. Mall security camera angle. He could see himself crossing the food court, his face clearly visible. Diane sitting by the poinsettias, her back to him. His hand coming down. The crack is audible even through the camera's audio. Her head snapping to the side. And then everything else. Her turning back. Her calm face. The phone call. The men in suits materializing. His frozen stance. Hands still up like he'd been caught in a photograph. The caption. Man slaps wrong woman at Westfield. FAFO in real time. Marcus scrolled to the comments. His heart was pounding. Oh shit, is that who I think it is? Check the ring on her hand, zoom in. Someone's about to have a very bad week. Bro doesn't know, does he? That's JP's wife. That man is cooked. Who's JP? If you have to ask, you're lucky. Don't look it up. Seriously. Nah, look at 043 when the suits show up. That's the crew. I've seen them before at the harbor. RIP to this man's entire existence. Marcus's hands were shaking again. He clicked on one of the profiles making comments. Young Korean guy. Profile mostly in Korean, but one tweet in English from 2 months ago. Saw Mr. Park at the restaurant tonight with his wife. She's beautiful. He looked happy. Never thought I'd see him look happy. Mr. Park. Marcus opened a private browser window. Typed carefully, Jin-Woo Park organized crime. The first page of Google had nothing. News articles about a Park Jin-Woo who was a violinist, an architect, a professor. Then he added Korean and underground. Still nothing official. But the third page of results had a Reddit link. A thread from 6 months ago in a local city subreddit, quickly locked by moderators. The original post was deleted, but the comments were still visible. Why are posts about JP always deleted? Because people who talk too much about him tend to move away suddenly. My uncle worked at the harbor. Said there's one shipping company nobody ever inspects. Everybody knows whose it is. Nobody says the name out loud. My cousin's husband insulted his wife at a restaurant. Didn't know who she was. 3 days later, their whole family moved to Alaska. Just packed up and left. Cousin won't talk about it. That's an urban legend. Believe what you want. I know what I know. Marcus felt cold. He clicked back to Twitter. The video was at 890,000 views now. Someone had posted a second angle from a phone closer up. You could see Diane's face clearly after the slap. The pity in her eyes. The complete absence of fear. A new comment appeared as he watched. She didn't even flinch, because she knew he couldn't hurt her. She's protected by someone scarier than anything this fool has ever imagined. Now, Marcus thought this was just internet conspiracy, people making up stories about organized crime that probably didn't even exist anymore, not like in the movies. But here's what he didn't discover until 2 days later, sitting across from a detective who'd politely suggested he come in for a conversation. Jinwoo Park's legitimate export businesses generated $47 million annually in documented revenue. His estimated underground operations, gambling, protection, high-end smuggling, were valued at 10 times that. The police knew. The FBI knew. Everyone knew. But Jinwoo Park had never spent a single day in jail. He was too careful, too connected, too smart. And the one thing everyone agreed on was that you didn't touch his wife. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Back in that parking lot, Marcus had no idea he'd just struck the one person in the city who was completely untouchable. His phone buzzed again. Another unknown number. 2847, Riverside Drive, apartment 304. That's your address, right, Marcus? His address. Someone had his address. The next text came through before he could process the first. Shanice Williams, First National Bank, downtown branch. She works late on Thursdays. His girlfriend's name, her workplace, her schedule. Marcus's throat closed. He tried to respond, to ask who this was, but his fingers wouldn't work. A third text, don't worry, nobody's coming for you. Not yet. Someone wants to talk first. But to understand why Marcus was now sitting in his car, terrified of shadows, we need to understand what Diane's life looked like before Jinwoo Park. Because the woman who could speak fluent Korean and command armed security with a phone call hadn't always existed. 18 months ago, she was someone else entirely. 3 years ago, when Marcus left her, Diane had believed him when he said she was holding him back. She'd believed him when he said she had no ambition. She'd even believed him when he said she should be grateful he'd stayed as long as he did. She spent the first month crying, the second month angry. By the third month, she was just tired. She picked up extra shifts at City General. Then more shifts. Within 6 months, she was working 60, 70 hours a week, splitting time between the ER and a private clinic across town. She stopped seeing friends, stopped returning calls from her mother. Sleep became something she did in 4-hour blocks between shifts. The rent was always due, the car insurance, the phone bill, the utilities. She paid what she could when she could and fell behind on everything else. Month 14 after Marcus left, her landlord posted an eviction notice. She was 2 months behind, and there was no catching up. She had 11 days to vacate. She didn't tell anyone. What was there to say? That she'd failed? That Marcus had been right about her? On day 8, she packed everything that mattered into her car. 2 boxes of clothes, a photo album, her nursing textbooks. She left the furniture, left the dishes, left the life she'd tried to build. The night they changed the locks, Diane sat in her Honda Civic in the hospital parking lot and did the math. She had $847 in her checking account. Her car insurance was due in 3 days, $230. She owed 2 months on her phone, $156. Gas to get to work and back for the next 2 weeks, roughly $80. That left $381 for everything else. Food, toiletries, parking if she couldn't find free spots. She couldn't afford an apartment. Even a studio required first month, last month security deposit. She'd need $3,000 minimum, and it would take months to save that while living in her car. The car that was now her home. She cried that night. Not the loud, gasping crying from those first weeks after Marcus. This was different, quieter, emptier. The kind of crying that comes when you've hit bottom and realize the bottom has a basement. She was 27 years old, a registered nurse, working 70 hours a week. And she was homeless. At 11:47 p.m., she stopped crying. She wiped her face with the sleeve of her scrubs. The same scrubs she'd been wearing for 3 days because she'd left her clean ones in the apartment. She ate 5 crackers from the pack she'd bought from the vending machine. That was dinner. Then she made herself a promise. She would survive this. And when she came out the other side, she would never, ever be this vulnerable again. She would become someone who couldn't be broken. Someone who didn't need anyone. Someone who chose her own life instead of accepting whatever scraps were offered. She had no idea that in less than 4 hours, a man would come through the ER doors bleeding from a knife wound, would look at her and see something no one else had seen in months, her dignity, still intact despite everything, and would decide she was worth protecting. She had no idea that refusing his money would matter more than accepting it. She had no idea that the worst night of her life was about to become the first night of something entirely different. At 2:03 a.m., she clocked in for her shift. Her badge still worked. Her scrubs still fit. She still knew how to save lives even when she couldn't save her own. And at 2:17 a.m., 4 men in expensive suits would crash through the ambulance bay carrying a 5th man who was dying. And Diane Mitchell's old life would end forever. Marcus made it home somehow. He didn't remember driving. One moment he was in the mall parking lot staring at his phone. The next he was sitting in his apartment with all the lights off, watching the view count on the video climb past 2 million. His phone rang. Unknown number. He let it go to voicemail. It rang again. Same number. On the 3rd call, he answered. Mr. Thompson. The voice was male, calm, American accent with no trace of anything else. My name is David Chun. I work for someone whose wife you struck today. I'm parked outside your building. We should talk. Marcus looked out his window. 4th floor, view of the parking lot. A black Mercedes sat in a visitor spot, engine running. He couldn't see inside through the tinted windows. I didn't know. I know you didn't. That's why we're having a conversation instead of something else. I'll wait 5 minutes. Come down or I come up. Your choice. The line went dead. Marcus's legs felt weak as he walked to the elevator. This was insane. This was America. You didn't get visited by men in Mercedes for slapping your ex-girlfriend. Except the comments on that video kept saying otherwise. The way people talked about JP, like he was a myth that occasionally became real. The Mercedes passenger door opened as Marcus approached. The interior was leather, immaculate, probably cost more than Marcus made in a year. The man in the driver's seat was Korean-American, mid-30s, wearing a suit that fit perfectly. No weapon visible, but Marcus would bet everything he owned there was one nearby. Get in. Marcus got in. David Chin didn't start driving. He just sat there, hands on the wheel, looking straight ahead at the apartment building. Here's what's going to happen, Chin said. His voice was conversational, like he was explaining directions to the grocery store. Nothing. For now. Mr. Park's wife asked that we not overreact. She said you were together once, that you probably didn't understand the situation. She's a compassionate woman. I didn't mean. Let me finish. Chun turned to look at him. His eyes were empty of emotion. Professional. You struck her in public. In our culture, a wife's dignity is her husband's honor. You didn't just hit Diane. You disrespected Mr. Park in front of witnesses. In front of cameras. That video has 4.2 million views right now. Marcus's mouth was dry. I'm sorry. I'll apologize. I will. You'll do nothing. You'll say nothing. You won't contact her. You won't mention her name. You won't tell this story at parties. You'll go about your life, and you'll be grateful Mrs. Park is the kind of person who believes in second chances. Chun reached into his jacket. Marcus flinched. But Chun pulled out a tablet, not a weapon. He tapped the screen a few times, then handed it to Marcus. Before you think this is over, I want you to understand what a second chance means in this context. The tablet showed a news article from 8 months ago. Local family relocates to Alaska for skip to the part that matters. Chen interrupted, swiping to a different screen. Photos Robert Chen's house. His wife's car. his daughter's school, his brother's business, all marked with red timestamps spanning 3 days. 72 hours, Chun said quietly. That's how long it took for Robert Chen's life to become impossible. Not because anyone threatened him, because doors closed, opportunities vanished. His world just stopped working. Robert Chun, David said. No relation. He was at a restaurant with his wife. Mrs. Park was there with friends. Robert had been drinking. He made a comment when she walked past his table. Something crude about her appearance. He thought he was being funny. Chun swiped to another article. 3 days later, his employer discovered irregularities in his work. Nothing illegal, just enough to make him a liability. He was let go. Then his wife's car was broken into. Nothing was stolen, but it was unsettling. Then his daughter's school called about an issue with her enrollment. Then his landlord decided to sell the building, and everyone needed to move out. Marcus stared at the tablet. Robert Chun didn't move to Alaska because he wanted to, David continued. He moved because every door in this city quietly closed. His wife's parents suggested they leave. Their church pastor suggested they leave. Even his brother suggested they leave. And he never knew why. He still doesn't. He just knows that his life became impossible here. Chun took the tablet back. That's what happens when you insult Mrs. Park. You struck her. Do you understand the difference? Marcus nodded. His throat was too tight to speak. Good. Now, Mrs. Park has asked that we give you time to understand what you've done. To reflect. No one will bother you. But if you speak about this, if you contact her, if you do anything that suggests you haven't learned, Chen's voice stayed perfectly calm. Robert Chun will have company in Alaska. Marcus got out of the car on shaking legs. The Mercedes pulled away slowly. No rush, no drama. Just gone. Back in his apartment, Marcus did what Chun had told him not to do. He researched. He went deep into forums, old news articles, archived posts. He found patterns. A business owner who'd refused to pay protection money to the Korean syndicate. His restaurant had a fire 6 months later. Electrical issue. No proof of arson. But he never reopened. A prosecutor who'd pushed too hard on a case involving Korean organized crime. She was transferred to a different department. A lateral move. Her career just stopped advancing. A journalist who'd written an expose on underground gambling operations. Nothing happened to him directly, but his sources dried up. His editor assigned him to other stories. The expose never ran. Now, Marcus thought these were just coincidences, urban legends, the kind of stories people tell to make organized crime seem more powerful than it really is. But here's what he didn't discover until a week later, when his own bank called to tell him there was a temporary hold on his accounts pending a routine audit. Jinwoo Park didn't need to be directly violent because he'd spent 15 years building a network of influence that made violence unnecessary. Judges owed him favors. Police captains looked the other way. Business owners paid tribute disguised as consulting fees. The legitimate world and the underground world had merged so completely that you couldn't tell where one ended and the other began. Power wasn't about guns anymore. It was about knowing which phone calls to make. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Back in his apartment, Marcus had no idea that the routine audit was already being scheduled. Marcus couldn't understand how Diane, who'd been so powerless, had become the center of this protected world. The answer was in what he'd never bothered to see when they were together. Her value had always been there. He'd just been too blind to recognize it. To understand that we need to go back to the weeks after Jinwoo left the hospital. Diane didn't hear from him. She'd saved his life, refused his money, and assumed that was the end of it. She went back to her car, her crackers, her double shifts. Life continued its grinding rhythm. 3 weeks after the surgery, she arrived at the hospital for her evening shift and found an envelope in her locker. Inside was a paid receipt for 3 months of car insurance. The note attached said only, "So you don't have to worry. JW. She stood there holding it, not understanding. The insurance company's name was one she'd mentioned to a coworker weeks ago, frustrated that they kept raising her rates. but she'd never told the patient in or two about her car insurance. She'd never mentioned living in her car, which meant he'd looked into her life, found out what she needed, paid for it without asking. The next week, her hospital badge suddenly gave her access to the staff gym and showers. She hadn't requested the upgrade. When she asked HR, they said there'd been a clerical error, and she'd always been supposed to have that access. The week after that, she found a box in her locker. Inside were clean scrubs, her exact size, better quality than the hospital provided. The note: "You deserve clothes without holes. JW." She didn't know how to feel about any of this. Grateful? Uncomfortable? Suspicious? But she kept the scrubs. Jinwoo Park didn't approach Diane directly for 2 months. He watched from a distance, learning who she was when no one was watching. He saw her share her lunch with a homeless woman outside the hospital. Half a sandwich, the only food she'd brought for her 12-hour shift. He saw her stay late to comfort a patient's family when she could have clocked out. He saw her pull coins from her car's cup holder to buy coffee for a coworker who'd had a bad day. What Jinwoo saw was something rare in his world. Genuine dignity. Not the performance of dignity, the kind people put on when they want something, but the real thing. The kind that exists even when you're sleeping in your car. The kind that doesn't disappear when life gets hard. In Korean organized crime, honor isn't just a word. It's the foundation of everything. The reason people follow you. The reason they stay loyal even when following you becomes dangerous. Jinwoo had built his entire organization on honor, on keeping his word, on protecting what was his. And he'd never met a woman who understood honor the way Diane did. Not because she'd been taught it, but because it was simply who she was. The first time he spoke to her directly, it was at a coffee shop near the hospital. He was sitting at a corner table. She walked in after a night shift, exhausted, counting quarters for a small coffee. "Diane Mitchell." His voice made her turn. She recognized him immediately. The patient from or to. He looked different now, healthy, powerful, wearing a suit that probably cost more than her car. But his eyes were the same. Intelligent. Evaluating. "You're the kitchen accident," she said. He smiled. "May I buy you coffee? And perhaps breakfast?" She hesitated. "I don't take money from patients. I remember. That's why I'm asking to buy you a meal, not give you cash. There's a difference." She studied him. He met her gaze evenly, no pressure, no expectation. Just an invitation. "One breakfast," she said. They talked for 2 hours. He asked about her life, not invasively, just curious. She asked about his import business. He answered honestly enough that she understood what he really was, and vaguely enough that she could pretend not to. When they left, he didn't ask for her number. He just said, "I'd like to see you again, if you're willing." "Why?" Diane asked. Jinwoo considered the question seriously. "Because in my world, everyone wants something from me. Everyone performs. Everyone calculates. You refused my money. You slept in your car rather than compromise. You have something most people in my life don't have." "What's that?" "Honor." Over the next months, Jinwoo courted Diane in a way that felt old-fashioned, traditional. He didn't rush. He helped her find an apartment, made calls, found a place she could afford with a landlord who wouldn't ask too many questions. He never offered to pay her rent. He knew she'd refuse. He just removed obstacles. He showed up at the hospital when her shifts ended, not to pressure her, just to walk her to her car. The parking lot felt safer with him there. He sent her books he thought she'd like. He listened when she talked about her dreams of finishing her nursing degree properly, becoming a nurse practitioner. He took her seriously. What Diane didn't know, what she wouldn't learn until much later, was that Jinwoo's entire organization was watching this courtship. His lieutenants, his advisors, his family back in Korea. They all had opinions about him choosing a black woman from poverty, someone with no connections, no family wealth, no strategic value. And Jinwoo made it clear that anyone who disrespected her would answer to him personally. By month 12, when he asked her to marry him, Diane understood what she was saying yes to. Not just a man, An entire world. A world where respect was currency and honor was law. The traditional Korean wedding ceremony took place in a private room with only family and close associates present. Jinwoo's mother and aunts had flown in from Seoul. They dressed Diane in a traditional hanbok, red and gold, and taught her the formal bows. When Jinwoo's mother bowed to her, a gesture of welcoming her into the family, Diane understood she wasn't just becoming someone's wife. She was becoming protected, untouchable, a person whose dignity was now tied to the honor of everyone in that room. And when Marcus Thompson raised his hand in that Christmas mall 18 months later, he wasn't just striking Diane. He was striking the honor of every person who'd bowed to her that day, every person who called Jinwoo their boss, every person who understood that Mrs. Park's dignity was not negotiable. Marcus still didn't understand this. Not yet. But he was about to learn exactly what it meant to strike someone whose dignity an entire organization had sworn to protect. The morning after David Chen's visit, Marcus woke up to 17 missed calls. None from numbers he recognized. His hands were still shaking from the night before, the Mercedes, the comm threat, the tablet showing what happened to people who crossed Mrs. Park. He called in sick to work. His boss, Kevin, sounded annoyed but didn't push. Marcus spent the day on his couch, refreshing the video. 7 million views now. The comments had shifted from shock to speculation. People were posting screenshots, zooming in on details. Someone had identified the Cartier bag in Diane's collection. Another person claimed to have seen the crew at a restaurant downtown 6 months ago. His phone buzzed. Email from HR. Meeting requested for Monday 9 a.m. Please confirm attendance. That was it. No subject line. No context. Just a summons. Marcus confirmed. What else could he do? Now, Marcus thought this was standard HR protocol, maybe a warning about the viral video affecting company image. But here's what he didn't discover until he walked into that meeting 3 days later. His termination paperwork had been drafted 16 hours after the slap, before he'd even made it home from the mall. The decision wasn't made by Kevin or by HR. It came from a phone call to the regional director from someone whose name never appeared in any documentation. The company's largest client had suggested, very politely, that Marcus Thompson's continued employment might create uncomfortable complications for their business relationship. That client's warehouse operations were managed by a Korean logistics company that appeared completely legitimate on paper. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Back in his apartment on that Friday morning, Marcus had no idea the phone call had already been made. Saturday morning, his bank app wouldn't load. He tried logging in on his laptop. Account temporarily unavailable. Please contact customer service. He called. Waited on hold for 40 minutes. The representative was apologetic but vague. There's a routine audit on your account, Mr. Thompson. Should be resolved within 5 to 7 business days. What kind of audit? I don't have those details. The notice just says routine verification. His checking account, his savings account, both frozen. He had $340 in his wallet and half a tank of gas. This is illegal, Marcus said. His voice cracked. You can't just freeze someone's money. The audit is within our terms of service, sir. We'll contact you once it's resolved. Sunday, his landlord called. Mr. Patterson had always been easy to deal with. Barely raised rent in 3 years. Fixed things promptly. Now his voice was different. Formal. Distant. Marcus, I need to inform you that I won't be renewing your lease. What? It's not up for another 7 months. I'm invoking the 60-day termination clause. Section 14B. My daughter's moving back from college. Needs a place to stay. Your daughter's in California. She's a sophomore. I met her last summer. Silence on the line. Then, plans change. You'll have 60 days from today. Marcus's hands were shaking again. This is because of the video. Someone got to you. I don't know what you're talking about. I'm simply exercising my rights as... How much did they pay you? Mr. Patterson hung up. Marcus sat on his couch, phone in his hand, trying to understand how his life was collapsing without anyone actually doing anything to him. No one had threatened him directly. No one had broken any laws. His bank account was under routine audit. His lease had a termination clause. His HR meeting was standard protocol. But every door was closing. He thought about Robert Chun, the man in David's tablet. The family who moved to Alaska because their life became impossible. Now Marcus understood what impossible meant. It meant watching everything fall apart through coincidences that weren't coincidences. It meant knowing exactly who was doing it but having no way to prove it, no way to fight back. He opened his laptop and started typing an apology. To Diane. He'd send it through what? Her Instagram was gone. Her phone number disconnected. He didn't know where she lived. He didn't even know her married name until that video went viral. He tried anyway. Searched Diane Park contact and found nothing. Searched Jinwoo Park wife and got only the video, reposted across every platform, each version with more views than the last. Monday morning, Marcus put on his best suit and drove to the office. The security guard who usually waved him through asked for his badge. Marcus handed it over. The guard scanned it, frowned, scanned it again. Sir, your access has been revoked. I have a meeting with HR. Let me call up. The guard picked up the phone, spoke quietly, then gestured to the lobby chairs. Someone will be down. 20 minutes later, a woman Marcus didn't recognize appeared with a manila folder and a banker's box. Mr. Thompson? I'm Sandra from Human Resources. We'll need to conduct this meeting here in the lobby. In the lobby? Company policy for terminated employees. You no longer have building access. The words hit like cold water. Terminated. Past tense. Already done. Sandra sat across from him, sliding papers across the coffee table. Your employment has been ended effective immediately due to restructuring. Here's your severance package, 2 weeks' pay. Your health insurance continues through the end of the month. Please sign here. Marcus stared at the papers. I've been here 6 years. I'm the top performer in my division. The decision is final. You can contest it through the appeals process outlined on page 4, but I should inform you that your performance reviews from the last quarter have been inconsistent. What are you talking about? I hit every target. Sandra opened the folder, showed him documents Marcus had never seen. Performance improvement plans dated weeks ago. Written warnings about attitude issues and client complaints. All signed by Kevin with Marcus's signature forged at the bottom. I never signed these. I never even saw. The documentation is complete, Mr. Thompson. You can consult with an attorney if you'd like, but I'd encourage you to accept the severance and move forward. The banker's box contained his desk belongings. Someone had already packed them while he sat in the lobby. His coffee mug with the chip on the rim. His spare phone charger. The framed photo of him and Shanice from Cancun. Her smile now feeling like it belonged to a different life. Marcus signed. What else could he do? Fighting meant lawyers, and lawyers meant money he didn't have. Money currently frozen in an account under routine audit. He carried the box to his car and sat behind the wheel, not starting the engine. His phone buzzed. Text from Shanice. We need to talk. Tonight. He knew what that meant. She'd seen the video. Everyone had seen the video. And Shanice was smart enough to understand that staying with Marcus now came with complications she didn't want. Marcus's phone buzzed again. Unknown number. Just an address. Parking garage, level 3, 8 p.m. Come alone. He stared at the message for 5 minutes. Every instinct said don't go. But every instinct also knew he didn't have a choice. The walls were closing in, and whoever was squeezing had made it clear they could reach him anywhere. At least if he went to the meeting, he'd know who he was dealing with. At 7:45 p.m., Marcus pulled into the parking garage. Multi-level structure downtown, mostly empty at this hour. He drove up to level 3, found a spot near the elevator. Waited. At exactly 8 p.m., a black sedan pulled in. Not the Mercedes from before. This one was larger, more expensive. The back door opened. Jinwoo Park stepped out. He was exactly as he appeared in the few photos Marcus had found online. Mid to late 30s, Korean, wearing a long black double-breasted coat that probably cost more than Marcus's terminated salary. But photos didn't capture the presence. The way he moved like he owned not just the space but the air itself. The way his eyes assessed Marcus in 2 seconds and found him wanting. Jinwoo walked slowly toward Marcus's car. No security visible, though Marcus would bet everything he owned they were nearby. Jinwoo stopped 10 feet away and waited. Marcus got out. His legs felt weak. Mr. Thompson. Jinwoo's English was perfect, barely accented. Thank you for meeting me. Did I have a choice? Everyone has choices. You've made several recently. Jinwoo's expression didn't change. Walking away would have been a choice. You chose to come. That shows some wisdom. Marcus forced himself to stand straight. I didn't know. About Diane. About you. I swear I didn't know. I believe you. Jinwoo's hands were in his coat pockets. Posture relaxed. If you'd known, you would have been more careful. But ignorance doesn't erase action. You struck my wife in public. You disrespected her in front of witnesses. In my culture, a wife's dignity is inseparable from her husband's honor. You didn't just hurt Diane. You challenged me. I'm sorry. I'll apologize to her. I will. She doesn't want your apology. Jinwoo's voice was soft, almost kind. She told me you were together once. That you left her when she had nothing. That you believed she would stay nothing. Your shock at seeing her happy. That was what made you violent. Marcus couldn't speak. My wife, Jinwoo continued, has asked me to be lenient. She says you're not worth the trouble. That hurting you would make her no better than you. He smiled slightly. She's more merciful than I am. What do you want? I want you to understand what you've done. Not just the slap. The years before. The way you treated her when you thought she had no power, no value, no future. You see, Mr. Thompson, my wife has honor. Real honor. The kind that exists even when you're sleeping in your car outside the hospital where you work double shifts. Even when you're wearing scrubs with holes in them. Even when men like you tell her she's not good enough. Marcus's chest felt tight. I built my organization on honor, Jinwoo said. Loyalty, respect, protection. When I met Diane, she had nothing. But she refused $50,000 I offered her because taking money for saving a life violated her principles. She lived in poverty but shared her lunch with homeless strangers. She had dignity when dignity cost her everything. That's why I married her. Not because she was beautiful or convenient or connected. Because she was worthy. Jinwoo took a step closer. You thought you were trading up when you left her. You thought the woman with a master's degree and a downtown condo was the upgrade. But you don't understand value. My wife has something your new girlfriend will never have. Something you will never have. What's that? Honor that can't be bought or borrowed. The kind that remains when everything else is stripped away. Jinwoo's eyes were cold now. That's what you struck when you raised your hand. And that's why what happens next isn't revenge. It's consequence. Marcus's voice came out as a whisper. What happens next? You've already felt it beginning. Your job, your apartment, your bank accounts, all perfectly legal, all perfectly coincidental. No one broke any laws. No one threatened anyone. Things just became difficult for you. Make it stop. Please. It will stop, Jinwoo said. When you've learned what my wife learned when you abandoned her. What it feels like to have the ground disappear beneath your feet. What it costs to rebuild yourself from nothing. You'll work lower-paying jobs. You'll struggle with rent. You'll understand what survival actually means. And maybe you'll become someone with actual honor. Jinwoo turned to leave, then paused. My wife asked me to tell you something. She said to say she's not angry. She said you leaving her was the best thing that ever happened to her. Because it forced her to become someone who could never be left again. She wanted you to know that you did her a favor. He walked back to the sedan. The door closed. The car pulled away smoothly, taillights disappearing down the ramp. Marcus stood alone in the parking garage, surrounded by concrete and fluorescent lights, finally understanding that the worst part wasn't what was happening to him. The worst part was that Diane didn't even care enough to be angry. Marcus thought the parking garage meeting was the end. Jinwoo had delivered his message. The consequences had already begun, and there was nothing Marcus could do to stop them. He drove home in silence, Jinwoo's words echoing in his head. You did her a favor. But 3 days later, his phone rang. A number he didn't recognize, but by now he'd learned to answer those calls. Mr. Thompson. A woman's voice. Professional, calm. Mrs. Park would like to meet with you. Tomorrow, 2 p.m. I'll text you the address. The line went dead before Marcus could respond. The address arrived 2 minutes later. It led to a glass building downtown. Suite 807, Phoenix Foundation. Rising from the ashes to help others rise. Marcus's throat tightened reading the plaque. Diane appeared at exactly 2 p.m. Red blazer. White pants. The same outfit from the mall. Deliberate. She wanted him to remember. Come in, Marcus. She slid a single sheet across the desk. Contract. He scanned the terms. Public apology, community service, counseling, restraining order. His consequences, reduced to bullet points. If you sign this, Diane said, everything else stops. Your bank accounts unfreeze. Your landlord finds a way to let you stay. You'll still need to find a new job, but the blacklist ends. You'll be able to work again, just not in management. Not in positions of power over others. Marcus stared at the paper. And if I don't sign? Then what's happening now continues. For as long as my husband decides it should. You saw what happened to Robert Chin. He moved to Alaska because every door closed. You'll find doors closing too. Not just here. Everywhere. You'll move cities and it will follow you. You'll change industries and it will find you. Because the truth is, Marcus, my husband has resources and patience that you can't imagine. Marcus's hands shook. Why are you giving me a choice? Diane leaned back in her chair. The afternoon light behind her made her look ethereal, untouchable. Because when you left me 3 years ago, you told me I should be grateful you stayed as long as you did. You told me I was holding you back. That I had no ambition, no future, no value. Do you remember? He nodded. Couldn't speak. I believed you, Diane said softly. For months, I believed I was worthless. I believed that sleeping in my car and working 70 hours a week just to survive was all I deserved. I believed that being abandoned was my fault. Tears started forming in Marcus's eyes. But then I met someone who saw value in me when I had nothing to offer. Who saw dignity in me when I was at my lowest. Who gave me protection not because I earned it, but because he believed I was worth protecting. Diane's voice never wavered. Jinwoo taught me that how people treat you when you have no power reveals who they are, not who you are. You. I'm sorry, Marcus whispered. I know you are, now. But you weren't sorry when you were with Shanice posting pictures, enjoying your upgrade. You weren't sorry when you sent me that message 2 weeks ago saying you missed what we had. You were only sorry when you discovered I had power. When you realized I wasn't beneath you anymore. Diane stood, walked to the window. I'm not angry, Marcus. I'm actually grateful. You leaving forced me to become someone who could never be left again. Someone who built her own value instead of accepting whatever scraps were offered. You taught me that lesson. It just cost more than you expected. She turned back to face him. Sign the contract. Do the community service. Learn what I learned, that dignity isn't about money or status. It's about how you treat people when you think no one's watching. When you think they can't fight back. That's where character lives. Marcus picked up the pen on her desk. His hand was shaking so badly he could barely write. But he signed. Every page. Every clause. Diane collected the papers, slipped them back into the folder. The women's shelter where you'll do your hours is 3 blocks from here. They help women who've left abusive relationships. Women who've lost everything. Women who are sleeping in their cars and working doubles and wondering if they'll ever be safe again. You'll meet them. You'll hear their stories. And maybe you'll understand why what you did at that mall mattered. She walked to the door, opened it. You can go now. Marcus stood, walked to the doorway, then stopped. Are you happy? Really? Diane smiled. Small. Genuine. Yes, I have work that matters. Partner who respects me. Resources to help others. I'm happy because I chose this life instead of accepting whatever was offered. That's the difference between us, Marcus. You're still waiting for life to give you what you deserve. I built what I deserved. Marcus left. The elevator ride down felt longer than the ride up. He emerged onto the street, blinking in the afternoon sun, holding the copy of the contract Diane had given him. His phone buzzed. Bank app notification. Account restrictions lifted. Another text from his landlord. Good news. Found a solution. You can stay. Everything Jinwoo had set in motion was stopping. Because Diane had asked. Because she'd chosen mercy over revenge. Marcus walked 3 blocks to the women's shelter. Stood outside for 10 minutes, gathering courage, before going in to register for his community service hours. Inside, a woman at the front desk smiled at him. You must be Marcus. Mrs. Park called ahead. Said you'd be starting today. She handed him a schedule. Your first shift is Saturday. We need help in the kitchen and with childcare. You'll be working directly with residents. Marcus took the schedule, nodded, thanked her. He didn't know it yet, but on his 3rd Saturday, he'd meet a woman named Patricia who was sleeping in her car with her 2 kids, working 3 jobs, trying to save enough for an apartment deposit. He'd hear her story and see himself in it, not as the victim, but as every person who'd ever made her feel small. And something would shift, but that was still weeks away. Today, 2 years after the slap, Marcus Thompson works in customer service. Not management, never management again. He drives a used Toyota and lives in a 1-bedroom apartment in the same neighborhood where Diane used to sleep in her car. He chose that apartment deliberately. A reminder. The viral video still exists. 9 million views. Someone recognizes him maybe once a month. At the grocery store, the gas station, waiting for an oil change. The recognition in their eyes is never kind. But Marcus doesn't look away anymore. He carries it. That's the point. Diane Park runs the Phoenix Foundation full-time. The organization has expanded to 3 cities with a $3.2 million annual budget. They provide housing assistance, legal aid, job training, and counseling for women leaving abusive relationships. Jinwoo's legitimate businesses fund the majority of it, his import-export companies, his real estate holdings, his restaurant investments. All perfectly legal. All generating resources that Diane transforms into second chances for women who need them. She still wears red. Still carries herself with that same quiet dignity that Jinwoo saw in the hospital 18 months into her transformation. The diamond on her finger catches light in boardrooms and charity galas. She speaks at conferences about domestic violence and economic empowerment. She's been featured in magazines, interviewed on podcasts, photographed at events. And no one who sees her now would ever guess she once slept in a Honda Civic outside a hospital, eating crackers for dinner, wearing scrubs with holes in them. Jinwoo Park expanded his legitimate businesses, opened a community center in the neighborhood where Diane grew up, funds scholarships for nursing students. His underground operations continue, everyone knows they do, but they're invisible, untouchable, woven so completely into the city's fabric that you can't separate legal from illegal anymore. His power isn't about violence. It never was. It's about understanding that respect and fear are 2 different things, and respect lasts longer. The lesson that Marcus learned, that thousands of people learned from watching that video, is simpler than any of them expected. How we treat people when we believe they have no power reveals who we are, not who they are. Because people don't stay powerless forever. They transform. They rise. They find protection in unexpected places. They become untouchable. And when they do, they remember. They remember every word, every dismissal, Every moment you made them feel small. They remember how you treated them when you thought they'd never be able to fight back. Diane remembered. She just chose to respond with mercy instead of cruelty, with transformation instead of revenge, with a foundation that helps others rise instead of a vendetta that would have pulled Marcus further down. The woman in the red blazer sitting among Christmas poinsettias wasn't seeking revenge when Marcus's hand connected with her face. She was just existing in the life she'd built, the power she'd earned, the protection she'd found. The consequences that followed weren't her revenge. They were his own actions echoing back through a world that had shifted beneath him while he wasn't paying attention. She didn't need to destroy him. His cruelty when he thought she was powerless had already done that. She just gave him the chance to rebuild himself the way she'd rebuilt herself, from nothing with honor, one choice at a time. That's what this story is really about, not revenge, not karma, but recognition. Because somewhere right now, someone is treating another person like they'll never matter, like they'll stay powerless forever, like their dignity is negotiable. And that person, the one being dismissed, diminished, discarded, they're making a decision. Just like Diane did at 11:47 p.m. in a hospital parking lot. They're deciding who they'll become when they survive this. The people we hurt when we think they're powerless don't stay powerless. They transform. They rise. They remember. And when they do, we'll have no one to blame but ourselves. Stories like Diane's remind us of something we'd rather not admit. Every interaction is a test of our character, especially the ones where we think no one important is watching. The way we treat the waitress who messes up our order, the coworker we think can't help our career, the partner we believe will always be there. These moments reveal who we actually are when the mask comes off. And here's the uncomfortable truth. People remember. Not because they're keeping score, but because dignity, once violated, leaves a mark that doesn't fade even when circumstances change. What makes Diane's story stay with us isn't the dramatic reveal at the mall, or even Jean Woo's calculated response. It's her choice at the end. She had every right to let Marcus drown in the consequences of his own cruelty. Instead, she threw him a rope, not to save him from accountability, but to give him the same chance at transformation that her lowest moment had forced upon her. That's the kind of strength that only comes from surviving your own rock bottom. That's the kind of mercy that can only be offered by someone who's learned what it costs to rebuild yourself from nothing. So many of you have told me that these stories of hidden strength and unexpected justice resonate because you've either been the person sleeping in their car, holding on to dignity by a thread, or you've witnessed someone's transformation and wished you'd treated them differently when they had nothing. Thank you for spending this time with Diane's journey. Her story, like all the ones we explore here, isn't just about what happened to one person. It's about recognizing ourselves in the spaces between their choices and ours.